Testing, testing.
Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, like, wow, that was really something.
Thank you.
I'm probably way out of my league here, but I will have a couple of questions. Are you familiar with the Twin Tower UFO sighting?
Oh, yeah. I actually watched that live from Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia?
Yeah. I was in Saudi Arabia on 9/11.
That was almost certainly a human or a human.
There was a couple of CNN clips of UFOs near the Twin Towers, and all of a sudden they weren't on CNN anymore. They removed them. And actually, Dan Aykroyd told me about them. And very interesting. That's all I can say about that.
Okay. Are you comfortable with our ability to scale down this technology to, I don't know, use in a car sort of for personal transportation?
Well, the first thing that Boyd Bushman and I talked about was, I'm unplugged. Oh, now I'm back. The first thing that Boyd and I talked about is, what if you could take a GM Hummer, a gas guzzler, and put gravity cancellators on all four wheels and cancel out 50% of the weight? Well, the fuel economy would double. You would get maybe 24 miles to the gallon to a Hummer. And what if you canceled out 75% of it? We could all be driving big, luxurious cars.
Sure.
And there is some fears about us all flying around like the Jetsons, because not all of us know how to fly yet. And we'd all be crashing into each other. So that would be stage one. If you can cancel out a lot of the weight charge of gravity, your fuel economies or the different types of even electric cars would be phenomenally powerful.
And just one last question. Is it your sense that the recent downing of that plane had anything to do with this ray technology?
The recent downing of the planes in New York? Actually, there were two
Yes.
cases in New York now. The second case, everybody died. And I think that was upscale. I mean, there's no way, I always look for scientific proof. I'd want to see the radar. I also understand that electromagnetic field weapons that are beyond scalar are invisible. There's no munition, there's no smoke trail, there's no missile. You can't see them. So they're really the most dangerous weapon of all. In fact, luckily, recently, I had a meeting with the Undersecretary of Defense Cohen for Homeland Security in Hollywood, who was educating all these Hollywood producers. I don't know how I ended up at this meeting, but it's a long story. And in the end, I introduced him to a very important physicist that I used to work with on bomb detection for Homeland Security. And then I said, are you aware of electromagnetic weapons or beam weapons that have no munitions? Do you have any understanding that if these kind of weapons got into the hands of the wrong people, what could happen? And the subject just simply terrified them.
I have a question. This was a great thing. About Nancy Pelosi, are you going to talk to Nancy Pelosi about Disclosure Project? And if you do, what would you say to her?
Who's Nancy Pelosi? I know that name. Sorry. I don't know who that is.
She's the Speaker of the House.
She's the Speaker of the House? Oh my God. Well, what we have to tell her is we want their Congress to come and learn from our Congress. That's what I would say to her.
Thank you.
Do you know the difference in time on the drop test that was made? One stone hitting sooner than the other. Do you know the difference?
They did the test 9 times because Boyd wanted to confirm at Lockheed at the tower, the 59-foot tower where they dropped him. But the exact times, and I was really interested in that because it's only 59 feet. That's not very far. So if you can see a difference in the rate of fall in only 60 feet, that is phenomenal, even if it's visible. But the exact ratios, I don't know. No, I can ask Boyd that.
But wouldn't you have to worry about whether it would be air resistance difference?
No, because you know that heavier objects, spherical objects, and they were spherical, both of them. He wrapped a plaster around the north-north magnets, and then another one that looked identical. It would be exactly the same. No, in 59 feet, aerodynamics would not show any change. In fact, let's drop my pen and this little guy here, and we have aerodynamic problems, and they both fall at the same rate here. And on the moon, the feather fell at the same rate as
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You seem to have linked some of this energy here with the crop circles. And what exactly is the mechanism by which that energy is applied to the crop to make the crop circles? And in connection with that, now there recently apparently have been some rectangular crop circles. They're not all circular. And I've seen also where there's a little bouncing ball of light seems to be associated with those crop circles. Can you comment on any of those?
Well, firstly, I rarely talk about this, but I've had encounters with the spheroids right in front of me. I've actually seen them. And I was talking to Bob Brown about this last night, actually before I go there. Remember the test in the swimming pool? The interference patterns at 9 o'clock between clockwise and anti-clockwise produced rectangles, triangles, diamonds, all kinds of shapes. So interference patterns, depending on the way they're configured and the timing of the pulses, can produce any geometry you can imagine. Just like the sound of the sun produces beautiful geometries in water. You can take chaotic tap water, which looks crazy if you flash freeze it, and then you beam the sound of the sun at it and it completely reconfigures. Why the geometries? Because the geometries appear in the harmonic ratios, precise. These ratios are very precise. And if you look in the incident of Jeff Willey's UFO, and also if you look at the ratio in the Meyer UFOs, these ratios are so, I mean, they need to be tested. The tests that I've done have produced, I'm convinced that there is over unity happening. Even my little stones can cause your body electricity to, on a little voltmeter, to go higher. Why? Where's the extra energy coming from? Why was I only, 4 100ths of a volt and now I'm 108 hundredths of a volt? Where does that extra energy come from? It's because, in the 0 point field, to get to the 0 point field, you have to know the language of the harmonies of these codes. But interesting enough, going to the spheroids and the crop circles, I believe the crop circles are intelligent. W.C. Levengood shared his paper with me, and he's convinced there are electromagnetic waves that are coming from space somewhere. Whether they're satellites or not, he doesn't know. Whether they're ETs, he doesn't know. Are producing the geometries in the fields and causing the grass to heat and bend at the nodes. The fake circles are not worth doing any math on. Once you eliminate, if somebody has crunched the grass, then I'm not interested in doing any math on the circle. But if you can at least get to that point. Now the little spheroid beings, and some of them are quite large, this is amazing. Gary Schwartz, a Harvard-Yale psychiatrist who's in my film The Voice, has the most advanced consciousness studies lab in the nation at the University of Arizona at Tucson. And this is an amazing experience because, one night I went to bed really early, like 9 o'clock, and my wife was just talking to some very positive extraterrestrials. And I had no idea what she was doing. I woke up in the middle of the night, and because I feel this static in my body before I see ghosts and beings. I actually see them three-dimensionally because I've been meditating every day for 30 years, and these things happen when you do this meditation practice. And I saw these little basketball guys, burnt orange and turquoise, and they were moving around like this, 3 of them spinning around my wife's head, and they shot through the ceiling, and I went, oh my God, and I really saw this. And my friend Joseph Mark Cohen, a Jewish Kabbalah teacher, told me that these little spheroids in the crop circles are the Arcturians from the star system Arcturus. And I had already met them before in the same fashion. Spheres speaking to me in perfect English, hovering in my room right in front of me. I know that sounds like science fiction. But what interests me is Gary Schwartz comes to me and he said, David, when that was in this past November, he said that same week, very shortly before that, the military came to him and had this new ultra-infrared camera. You think of the FLIR cameras in Mexico and how they saw the UFOs, right? And these cameras can see so deep, the new one can see so deep into the invisible infrared in specific strata, very precise areas of the infrared that no camera's ever seen before. It was made by Mitsubishi. And the military said, Gary, can you help us? Because we're seeing things on this camera we can't explain. And he's a psychiatrist, and he does a lot of research with psychics who see ghosts and phenomena. And he has cameras that can see into the invisible. He said, David, you got to come to my lecture. Because exactly what you saw, you're going to see on film. A woman who was a trance channeler who was communicating with extraterrestrials, they filmed her with this ultra $700,000 camera. And all of a sudden, not like the two-dimensional orbs you see in the digital cameras. This thing looked like a basketball, and it was moving around just like the guys I saw, woo, 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 like really kind of fun, like a bee, buzzing around her head and whew, took off. Exactly as I had experienced. So I was excited about that because it was confirmation in the invisible that these spheroids exist and they are intelligent. And we've all seen, if anybody has seen the good crop circle movies, we've seen the evidence that the little orbs of light can even appear in the daytime, and they're probably making the circles. And possibly they are from Arcturus or other star systems. So, so that's my answer to that question. Now, Gary Schwartz, and Bob and I were talking about this last night at dinner. It's very interesting that what if a lot of these consciousness researchers, which we have at Princeton University, the Global Consciousness Project. Now this is really interesting. Random event generators are placed all over the planet, and for 20 years they've been testing these things, and they get precognitive signals. They got a signal on 9/11. They produced non-random, coherent numbers moments before 9/11. These random generators can sense the Earth's aura. Remember what I showed you in the math today. Coherent versus random numbers. What do coherent numbers mean? They mean harmonies, synchronicities. Something is about, there's a meaning to these numbers. And every single time at Princeton, this is where Einstein taught, they're searching the aura of the planet. The scientists in Russia, this is mind-blowing technology. There's a new camera that can see the entire aura in 3 dimensions. It can see how much energy all of our chakras are putting out in real time, how well they're talking to each other, how well aligned they are. And this scientist has 4 PhDs at St. Petersburg Tech University in Russia, and he's telling me about these new sensors that can see the real-time universe. So if we point our telescope at Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, it's 8.7 light years from Earth, we see it where it was 8.7 years ago. But mathematically, they can calculate where Sirius really is, and it's black, and they point these sensors there, they get a signal. Intelligent signals, they appear. Einstein discovered something called spooky action at a distance, which is instantaneous communication at a distance. Scientists have actually measured communication between little microbes in water dishes on the planet Earth suddenly go crazy around 8 minutes before a solar flare actually, when a solar flare emits on our sun, it takes over 8 minutes for it to get here. They're already reacting to prepare themselves for the solar flare. Now water is hydrogen and oxygen. The sun is hydrogen, oxygen, and minerals, just like water. They're communicating faster than light. So these little water sensors are being tested in Russia, and these guys, forget SETI, forget looking at radio waves. They're not broadcasting in radio waves. We can use these real-time sensors to make contact with extraterrestrials in real time. And so I think it's going to happen. Gary Schwartz and a lot of these researchers are very interested in the UFO phenomena and the ET contact phenomena. And hopefully, some of them will start speaking at this conference. One more question?
Nibiru.
Well, I've read all of Zecharia Sitchin's books. I mean, I'm a big Zecharia Sitchin fan. One thing that interests me about Nibiru is apparently its orbit is elliptical and counter-rotational to the other planets. And of course that interests me because it's a differential. But I can't say, I've seen a lot of articles on NASA's own website that are pretty stunning. I follow some very interesting things there. All of a sudden, just recently, this was several months back, Earth is being bombarded by super high energy cosmic rays beyond the normal background level. And it's coming from somewhere in a place in space where they're saying there's nothing there. Or maybe there is something there they don't want us to know. All of a sudden this extra level of cosmic energy is hitting Earth, and NASA knows this. They've never seen anything like it. So, but I'm not an expert on Nibiru, so I mean I'm a big Zecharia Sitchin fan, really huge. So anyway, thank you everybody for attending, and
It's Trevor James Constable, a New Zealand naval radar operator in World War II,
was the pioneer of invisible photography. In the 1950s in California, Trevor took these amazing photographs of UFOs over Landers, Giant Rock, California, where George Van Tassel was channeling extraterrestrials. The photos are so stunning to me because they show translucent discs of light, UFOs with dark holes in the center, identical to the NASA STS-75 UFOs from the space shuttle in 1996, in February 1996. So we have the same UFOs confirmed from two different sources over 40 years apart. So if you look at very closely what's going on, NASA is saying that these are pieces of debris floating right in front of the camera lens, and as they get in front of the lens, you get these fuzzy orbs of light called airy disks around them and giving the illusion they're UFOs. But if they were really that close to the camera, as NASA contends, how would they survive a long zoom? I did a very simple test with a digital camera, just like they're using. You hold a dime, which is bigger than any piece of dust you could find, and you hold it even a couple of inches or 6 inches in front of the camera. When you zoom in, you can't even see the dime. It disappears completely. And NASA's cameras zoom all the way in on the tether, which is 77 to 100 miles away from the camera, and the objects are still there. There's no way these are pieces of debris that are near the camera lens. There's no way, which confirms that they're actually as large as we say they are. They're passing behind the tether. The tether is 12 miles long. The UFOs are 2 to 3 miles wide in diameter, 1 to 3 miles in diameter, if they're right behind the tether. If they're further behind the tether than we think, they are much larger than that. And second, I confirmed with Dr. Joseph Newth III at NASA that NASA's video cameras can see into the near ultraviolet and the far ultraviolet, which is 2 bandwidths of ultraviolet, into the invisible spectrum where human eyes don't see. On July 9th, 1947, there was an incident in North Hollywood, in Hollywood, California, where people saw a flying saucer crash into this woman's yard and burst into flames. This is roughly the same time as the Roswell incident, which is roughly the week of July 7th through the 10th or the 9th of 1947. So a flying saucer crashes in Los Angeles. But what's amazing about the case, which is now listed under the Freedom of Information Act request on the FBI's website, this is a real case. What you're about to see are real photographs. They retrieved the flying saucer, and it's only 30 inches in diameter. 30 inches, and it's made of aluminum. And what really got my attention is that when you look at this thing, when they cut it in half and they opened it up, it's got a V-shaped notch and a black hole in the center. And if you look at the NASA STS-75 UFO, which I estimated 2 to 3 miles wide, it looks identically the same on the cameras. They can see into the invisible ultraviolet. You can see a dark hole in the center, you can see these strobing waves coming out of it, and you can see this notch cut out of the side of it. I mean, it's really quite remarkable. But when we actually look at what was found inside the craft, when we read the actual FBI documents, it says on the evening of July the 9th, 1947, a report was received in the Los Angeles office that a so-called flying disc had landed in the vicinity of Redford and Magnolia Streets in North Hollywood, California, and described it as approximately 30 inches in diameter. It weighed about 22 pounds. And in fact, we even have the address here of where it crashed, 11858 Magnolia Boulevard, North Hollywood. I mean, this is a very detailed report. But when they took the flying saucer and they cut it in half, and you look at these photographs, they found that it had a radio tube, it mounted in the center. So this thing was producing some kind of a magnetic field or some kind of waves, and produced anti-gravity. And they claimed when the FBI actually researched this, a bunch of kids claimed that they were actually, it was an experiment. Kids, this is what they're claiming in this FBI report. I mean, 16 years old. This kid was 16 years old. He said he built this thing. And when you really look at it, if a 16-year-old kid could build a flying saucer in 1947, the same day as the Roswell crash, where did he get the information? Was he having telepathic dreams? In the last couple of months, he decides to build this thing. Is this really not? This is really an extraterrestrial satellite that's connected to the main craft at Roswell. And when the craft at Roswell crashes down on the ground, it loses contact with its satellite, the little probe, and they both crash. But why a 16-year-old kid? Why is a 16-year-old kid claiming this? And if a 16-year-old kid did this, where is he today? Where is anti-gravity research today? And then, why aluminum? Is there something about aluminum that interacting with electromagnetic fields that causes anti-gravity? When we look at Boyd Bushman, the Lockheed senior research scientist, he actually shows us an experiment, and he tells us that both copper and aluminum, when they're interfaced with certain electromagnetic fields and magnetism, produces anti-gravity. The point in showing that piece of video from my From Here to Andromeda DVD is there were actually quite a number of reports in the FBI files of children, and this is pre-internet days, who built aluminum flying saucers with radio tubes in the middle, and they actually produced anti-gravity. And I would just imagine that Department of Defense would probably abduct all of those kids, and they would be working for Department of Defense, and nobody knows about, where they ended up. But what interested me is, why children? And of course, this would make a fantastic Steven Spielberg movie. Little kids getting downloaded information. Well, the same thing happened to me, but I wasn't 16. I was 7. And what I saw in the pursuing weeks in Berkeley were visions and dreams that I saw one set of lights, blue-green, spinning one way, clockwise, and then a kind of red-orange spinning counterclockwise on the same axis. And deeper than that, I was downloaded how the anti-gravity actually worked. And instead of becoming a psychologist like my father, who got a PhD at Berkeley, and my mom a lawyer, I wanted the answer to my UFO experience. I wanted to know what was going on here. I could not fall down the straight and narrow. And I got answers. It took me my whole life to eventually figure out that green and blue lights are a shorter wavelength than red and orange, and that between the clockwise, anti-clockwise pairs was something called a differential. And what interests me also about the NASA UFO, if people say these are out-of-focus orbs, I gave 2 arguments why. When you pan through the window on the airplane with the little ice crystals, you can't even see them anymore. And NASA's arguments were that little pieces of cookie crumbs or whatever are floating around the shuttle, the camera zooms through them and you get little orbs around them. But with those airy disks, nothing is in focus. I've seen them. They're truly out of focus. So why the Fibonacci spiral in the waveform, which you're seeing here? How did that show up? And so that begins a very, very deep investigation into a discovery that is actually quite amazing, into what we call differentials. Can we actually play video clip number 2 before we go to this? In crop circles, you have one lay of grass spinning clockwise and one lay of grass spinning anti-clockwise.
I'm Barbara Lamb, and I have been researching crop circles in England since 1990. So at this point, I've had 16 consecutive summers of crop circle research in England. I've been into literally hundreds of crop circles during those years, and I am particularly interested in the lay of the crops right down there on the ground, as well as the overhead view of the crop circles. In this particular crop circle, in early August in a place called Garsington, Oxfordshire, England, it was a very interesting spiraling of the crop, the wheat crop. You've got this portion spiraling along in a raised aspect. This is spiraling in a counterclockwise direction. But in the center of that portion of the circle, the crop is spiraling in a clockwise direction. And around the raised ridge, this crop circle is spiraling in a clockwise. So you have clockwise, counterclockwise, and clockwise again, all in the same circle of a larger formation. In this crop circle, formed the night of July 27th, 2005, at a place called Avebury Manor in Wiltshire County, England, was this extraordinary formation, which is called a quinquux or quintuplet formation, with the center circle and the 4 satellite circles and even more satellite circles, all in very even proportion. The extraordinary feature about this on the ground is that in the center circle, the wheat is laid perfectly evenly in a clockwise direction. However, there's also a band of other circles laid within that very same circle, and these 19 circles are laid in a counterclockwise direction. In that same center circle, the band, or the row of counterclockwise circles, is depicted here with details counterclockwise, 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 and so on all around in this extra band of counterclockwise circles within the clockwise larger circle.
If we look at this first crop circle, we can see that this literally looks like a flying saucer. I mean, it's disc shape, it has this three-dimensional quality, and as we look inside of it, we can see it's almost as if a lid is lifted off the top of the saucer to reveal what is inside. I believe, after studying the effects of subatomic particles in bubble chambers, that we are seeing a language in crop circles that is reminiscent of quantum physics. That the language is actually teaching us how to transform mass, cancel out gravity, produce anti-gravity, and eventually travel faster than the speed of light to visit other star systems. I literally believe that that's what the message is.
Now, same sound, same period of time, but in Denver, Colorado, there's also a news report about it.
Some folks in Schuylkill County are feeling a bit rattled after something that felt like an explosion shook the floors and windows of their homes.
But Friday night, something shattered the peace and quiet.
I was just sitting here on the couch, and it was around 9:30, and just a big boom, like it's almost like a quarter stick, and the house shook and the windows shook.
The Sterners weren't the only family to hear their windows rattle. Reports of explosions were phoned into the state police from across southern Schuylkill County.
Mind you that Denver is a place where rumors have it that the US have built a whole underground city that can hold up to 100,000 people under the airport. And no, it is not to solve the overpopulation of the World War III's, because the US is not that overpopulated yet, and the city is at a depth much greater than necessary to avoid a nuclear holocaust. Back to Canada, but in the early 2016. North America is not the only place with these sounds. Here's from Singapore on the 15th of January 2016. 3 weeks later, and we have this recorded from France. These trumpet sounds were on many news outlets. What are they? I have no idea. Nobody does. But the fact that they are all around at the same time all over the world at the same periods of Planet X being captured means that they must be related to the Nibiru catalysm. Maybe it's a strange magnetic phenomenon that happens when the two planets approaches and humans don't understand it yet. Or it might have been alien intelligence trying to give us a warning. Maybe all the UFOs are here not for fun or enslavement of mankind, but for warning us. After all, the Sumerians and key people talking of Planet X have all mentioned the appearance of extraterrestrial life forms associating with the event. Other than these, there have been winged global sightings, as well as crosses in the sky from all over the world. Michigan, Hawaii, Finland, everywhere. How do you explain this phenomena? I don't think there is any rational explanation other than something big is coming and it's going to be here really fast. If not, Why would the authorities be so sensitive about it? Not to mention all the underground facility they are secretly preparing. There can't be any better reason than the end of the world. That's it for today, guys. As these anomalies are taking places everywhere, we need each and every one of you to keep your eyes open, and if you have anything, please share it with us. It could be a lot of insights and maybe our survival tickets when Nibiru is actually here. So stay safe, guys, and keep your eyes on the sky. Don't forget to follow us for the latest updates, because we are really trying our best to get our hands on every smallest bit of information and links in order to keep everyone posted and maybe a head up before the doom of our civilization. What I'm trying to say here is that we can't do this alone and need your support. Your insights, your captures will be very valuable to our work of putting everything together and giving you guys the big pictures. So that's all I want to say for today, guys. Remember, look to the sky. This is JT at X Science, signing out.